It is time. It is time to finally get to talk about the SJ Porr Challenge. The 2016 SJ Porr Challenge. Brew a sessionable beer for a thirsty world. That's exactly what we did. I'm pretty stoked to finally be able to talk about this year's challenge, what I put into the challenge, some results, some feelings, some little bit of process, and then ongoing exploits from this here brew. So, like I said, we've had to keep it pretty tight, tight-knit as far as what we were letting the world know on who brewed what. We want to keep it as anonymous as possible, which I think is a really cool thing. Some guys already kind of knew, but they shouldn't have known specifically until we got after the rounds that they would have tasted it. I didn't want to, influence anybody. But this kind of became my baby, and I've been I'm really, really proud of this beer. So, if you've been following the challenge, you probably already know which one is mine, but you should absolutely know when I pour. Yes, sirree, Bob. Woo! Holy shnikes. Now, that was an extremely rough pour. Extremely. So it's not always that carbonated. But yes, indeed. And you can even pick up a little bit right there on the head on this beer. Yes, the beet beer, the kettle soured beet beer, has been my project for this SJ Porr Challenge. I had not brewed this beer previous to the challenge. I'm not going to say a ton because I'll get to that later. It was an inspiration from a commercial brew that I had tasted, and it kind of led to the formulation of this beer. I've fallen in love with this beer. It is more a Berliner Weiss. It drinks more like a Berliner Weiss than anything else. But it is kind of a saison by malt bill, by yeast, and a couple other factors that I'll get into later. So when I started the contest, I was calling this a kettle soured summer saison, I think I went with, and with beets added. And you can see what the beets did to this lovely. I hate it, even from all the videos that get posted on this beer, and I'm looking at it right now. None of the videos do the color of this beer justice. This thing is a ruby red color, and it's got a nice thick cap on it. It's almost meringue-like on the top right now. And the head is pink. It's like lightly pink. That was one of the coolest things that I got out of this beer that I did not expect, was the pink head to this beer. So I'm going to get me a taste. Cheers. I don't gush over my own beers most of the time. I'll talk about them sometime, but I don't gush over them. This is probably the beer I'm as much or more proud of than just about anything else I've done. Not just from a level of execution necessarily, but it is absolutely, truly exactly what I wanted. And when I first did this beer, the first time I brewed this beer was actually what went through the first and second round of the challenge. It was the very first go round at it. I did I believe it was 2 or 3 versions of this beer before the first round started. And the first one turned out the best. It did not turn out exactly the way I wanted to for the first 2 rounds, which is quite a shame. The beer was different enough and had the beets kind of integrated into this beer that nobody really knew, at least from my perception, and even personally. It's a tough one to wrap your mind around, so let me back up a little bit. This is a kettle soured saison, so it's tart, it's light, it's semi-light bodied, high carbonation, but then you've got these beets in here that do a really, really cool thing with like an earthy component. It brings a little salinity, a little bit of saltiness to it, and it is the most refreshing beer for me. Personal opinion, is the most refreshing beer I've ever had in my entire life. And this is going to be a very, very regular beer in my rotation for sure. Will always be. But what happened in the first 2 rounds? That was such a shame. The fermentation profile was not exactly the way I wanted it to be. It was close. I had a little bit of a trouble with the kettle souring portion of it. I struggled to get the lactobacillus to take fast enough. And so it ended up creating a little bit of a butyric acid, which some can kind of define as like baby diaper and like vomit, bile type of a smell, which sounds horrendous, and really it is. It's a bad off flavor. To me, it wasn't in huge amounts in this beer, but it was definitely there, especially if you were looking for it. And if you know sour beer off flavors pretty well. So there were a couple people that did pick up on it. Dan Pixley, who does tons of sour beers, he was the one I was most scared to taste this beer. I knew it was in there. He picked it up immediately, and I knew he was going to pick it up. Kevin Clements, who also got 3rd place in the whole darn competition, he picked up on it pretty solidly too. A couple other people called it out as being like a barnyardy. I think Josh Secor called it kind of a silage. But all that to say, I knew I might be able to get away with it because of the complexity and how it almost kind of worked with this beer. With the earthiness of the beets, with the tartness, somehow it still kind of worked. And from the results, it worked for a lot of people. But it was not what I wanted. And I hated that I had to put that out as the first 2 rounds of the beer, of the challenge. But I was still able to get through the Southeast region. We had some great beers in the Southeast region. I was in first in the Southeast region. And then the U.S.-Canada finals, I came in 3rd in the U.S.-Canada finals. I was just absolutely over the moon to get into the world stage, where I was able to finally do what I really wanted to do. And I got it right this time. This beer is the one I wanted to brew from the beginning. It's lovely. And again, I don't gush over my own beers that much. I will proudly put that beer in front of any beer geek. And so I made it to the World Finals. And to back up, the U.S.-Canada Finals, incredibly tight competition. Just phenomenal beers. Phenomenal beers. And then when we went to the world stage, next level, great beers. I truly had a hankering. I knew I was behind in the scoring. Coming in third, and I was somewhat of a decent margin in third. In the U.S. Category, I did not have high hopes to jump to the top 3 for the world. It was going to take a substantial amount of points gained on top of having to try and topple the guys who got in first and maybe second in the other regions. So I ended up in 5th place. 5th place in the world in this competition. I almost squeaked out 4th. Almost, so close. But 5th, and I am happy with 5th. Absolutely fantastic. Congratulations to Manuel with the Saison that won it. Great beer. Josh Hoover with the Coffee Red X IPA. Phenomenal beer. Kevin Clementson third with the Ultralight Milk Stout. Could not be more stoked for you guys to represent the SJ Porr Challenge with the Brewcraft USA kits. Absolutely phenomenal. And if I'm being honest, I don't know how in the world Brewcraft would have been like, dang it, how are we going to put a kettle soured beet beer into a kit? They would have found a way, but that would have been an exercise for some creativity right there. But nonetheless, what a competition this was. This was my first time, and just a really fun opportunity to taste so many amazing beers from around the globe. I got to taste beers from New Zealand and Australia, from Europe and the UK, and all across the US and Canada. And it cannot be understated, it cannot be overstated how awesome it was. I'm doing it again, absolutely. Not even to try and win it, but I will try to win it. It was a blast. It was so much fun. The only criticism I had of the competition, well, the first thing, you can't take this element completely out. It's tough when you're judging beers that your beer is up against. There's a natural tendency to try to figure out, okay, do I rate the beers a little bit lower? In the integrity of the competition, you shouldn't do that. I didn't do that. But there's an element that's always in the back of your mind of like, are people going to sabotage my beer because they want to win? That type of thing. I know we have a lot of great people in this homebrewing community, and I hope that would never happen. But it's still like in the back of your mind. I don't think there's anything you can do about that. So really, the only criticism I have of the competition this year, I think SJ and all the people who have put it together, Kevin, the coordinators, Hubs, have heard this, and I would imagine it'll be introduced in the next round. Is there badly needs to be a scale of scoring so that you have at least some guidelines of, if you think this beer is outstanding, it should be within 40, which is the highest, and 35. Or if it, that's a world-class example. If it's really good, it's 34 to 32. Some kind of tiered scoring system so that gives people a general guideline. Because I always found myself wondering, okay, I scored and it happened to me. I was on the higher end of the scale of the scoring scale. I rated a lot of beers really high in the scale. And so maybe that's my own fault for not quite understanding where others' scoring might fall. But that was my only criticism of not knowing where to fall on the scale, to where if I thought a beer was really good, take Dan Pixley's Sour. I fell in love with that beer. I rated that beer really, really high, really high. Because it was my highest. I think it was probably the highest scoring beer for me in the U.S. Canada finals, and but somebody else that may have fallen in love with Kevin Clements and thought it was the best beer in the entire, U.S. Canada finals, may have that thought it was equally as good as I thought the sour was, may have, not, dropped several points below what I would have rated. So we need a tiered scoring system just to give general guidelines. Won't belabor the point anymore. Because overall, I do not have enough good things. I cannot say enough good things about the competition. The way it was run was impeccable. The hubs, the coordinators, just awesome. Kudos to all you out there, and thank you so much for all the hard work that went into this. Finally, I have been humbly asked. There was a couple people on Facebook, on the SJ Porr Challenge Facebook group, that had hinted towards, hey, we would love to see how you made this beer. And I think I'm going to do it. I like Josh Hoover's, and I don't think it's originally his. I know Nate's done it before too, and a couple other people have done it. Like the brain to glass instead of grain to glass, brain to glass. So I'm going to walk through my thought process for this beer, ingredients, process, outcome, and and really for the first time walk you through kind of how I brew. I think I've been apprehensive about doing it in the past, honestly, because you put yourself out there as far as process and the way you go about things. It opens you up to a little bit of criticism and makes you somewhat, vulnerable to criticism. But I want to do it. I think it'll be fun. It'll be really the first time that I documented really in depth the meat of how I brew and kind of my system. And just an overall view of how I like to make beer. So I am going to get this queued up in the next couple months, something like that. I am going to have another batch of this ready come mid-spring, getting into summer here in Georgia, because this is the beer for summer. You need to make this beer, and I'm not just blowing smoke. You will not regret it, even if you don't like tart, even if you don't like earthy, saison-y. You need to make it. You need to try it. So I'm going to get out of here. Shout out to SJ Porr. Rest in peace, Paul. We miss you. I hate that I didn't ever get to meet you. You were an inspiration. You were an inspiration for this challenge. And it was a really, really fun ride. I appreciate all that participated. All the amazing beers and brewers out there. Cheers to y'all, and I'm coming for next year's challenge and cannot wait to see what the parameters are going to be. So, until next time, cheers, and make a pink beer. A pink, red, beet, soured beer. Cheers, y'all. Mmm.